Madam, everything set? अच्छा ठीक है, thank you. And share screen also you put up. Okay. ठीक है. हाँ, okay. Right, okay. No, you start. Okay, I'm say. ठीक है, thank you. Hello. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Dr. Seema. Right. Thank you, madam. Thank you. Am I audible, madam? Kindly.
Yes, sir. Audible.
Oliver, Dr. Seema. Dr. Seema, please test whether you are audible. Your audio is all right. Dr. Seema, please.
Seema, sir, madam's audio is not on.
Yeah. Madam, Seema, madam, please switch.
Okay, can you all hear me now, please?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very
Madam,
much.
we can
And
hear you.
thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to the first session of the auditing, which is a very interesting session, and I have been involved as an auditor for quite a long time. When we say audit, what do you understand by the audit? There are certain very important terminology, certain very important aspects of the audit. Audit is nothing but a kind of a review of your health system. That means your organization's well-being is being ensured using an audit as a tool. This is also a requirement of these standard. The ISO standards require audits to be done. Also, it is important with respect to the regulatory assessments. That means the regulatory bodies also want to ensure that you have implemented your things, you have achieved the compliance, and that is why they do the audits. So this auditing is a very, you can say, very well documented in a periodic and a very systematic fashion. You are trying to obtain the objective evidence against whatever you have been performing. So there are certain important terminologies which you have to keep in your mind when you are looking, when you are understanding the audit. It's a systematic approach, well documented procedure, periodically being done. That means it's not like that once I have done the audit, it's for all, but we have to do it. We have to set up the frequencies of doing an audit. It can be in 3 months, it can be in 6 months, or at least annually. Because we always say go for an annual health checkup of your body. When you attain some age, it is always mandated. So similarly, when you are implementing a system, it is important that you go for a verification of your system with regard to its suitability. So definition of the audit, this definition is being given by a standard called ISO 19011. Now you need to understand that for the audit, they are different standard, but there is a guideline document called ISO 19011, which gives how a person should be behaving and how auditor should do, what are the basic activities which needs to be covered in the audit. So most of my presentation will cover the aspect of ISO 19011. That is an important document as per your module also. Also, there are other standards like ISO 17021. Now, what is this ISO 17021? It is a standard which is meant for the certification bodies. It's a requirement standard where the accreditation bodies, that means the organizations get certified. Now, how to control, how to make sure that the certification bodies are doing their job appropriately? There is an accreditation system. So the accreditation bodies audit the certification bodies, and they are called the conformity assessment bodies, the CABs, and the standard is ISO 17021. For FSMS, we also use a standard called ISO 22003, which is again a standard for the certification bodies who are going to you know do the accreditation bodies are going to be doing the audit as per 22003. So now let's see, what does an audit actually means. The audit is a systematic, independent, and documented process for obtaining evidences. Evidences means you are actually looking into for the fact finding. Now, what can be my evidence? What do you think will be your evidence? The evidence will be any records, any observations, any actual documents, talking to the people. So there are different ways by which you can collect, obtain the evidence. To evaluate them objectively to see how much extent your audit criteria is fulfilled. So now, could you see a word? It has to be in a particular system. That means you cannot just simply simply uh, just to go and without following any there has to be a procedure, written down procedure, how you are going to do the audit. Then there has to be an independent way. That means a person who is performing its activities will not be doing the audit. So all these things has been systematically described, systematically put into place in a process flow, and then you go talk to people, make a program against a set criteria, right? So that's what is the definition of audit, which is very important for you to understand, because then only you'll be able to do justice to the auditing exercise. The key concept is we have a verification. What do you mean by verification? You are trying to evaluate the compliance to a particular requirement. There is a protocol which is to be followed. That means it has to be systematic, carried out in accordance to a set protocol. Periodic, the objective independence should be there, and then it has to be documented. That means at the end of each audit, you need to generate a report. Now, why at all we go for the audit? Because it is a mandatory requirement of a standard. That means if you're trying to go into the ISO standards, it is one of the mandatory requirements. You need to check as a self compliance, as a self assessment tool. You want to see whether the system is being effectively implemented or not. You have to actually try to find out the conformance of your system. In order to get the conformance, you actually will come out in the many of the non-conformities. That means you are trying to find out the non-conformances or lapses in your system. It also tells you which particular area, which particular department, which particular activity, and which kind of a documentation you are strong at. Then it can also help you identify the areas of improvement where you are doing good, but you can still improve and do better. It also helps you to identify where you need the corrective and preventive actions. Now, we know the basis of audit. What are the key things in the audit? Now, let's understand before we go ahead, what are the different types of audits. It's again very important, because in case you have to implement and do the practical exercise, the most commonly available type of an audit is called a first party audit. Why it is called first party? Because there is only one party involved in it, that is the organization, which is actually part of a food chain or part of the quality system. and that we also call it as internal audits. Now, what is internal audit? That means I am trying to evaluate the overall system effectiveness of my particular my own compliance, and that is being done by internal audit. Now, if you remember what was one another word in the audit, it was independent. Now, if I am doing an audit of my own organization, how will I ensure that I am independent? I can ensure that by by making that the auditors who is responsible to do the audit is independent of the work which is to be performed. That means you are not going to do the audit. If I'm working in a quality control department, I cannot audit a quality control department. I can go and do an audit of a purchase department. I can go and do the audit of a production department or management, but I'm not supposed to do the audit of the quality control. But then it's very important that I need to have the competence to do the audit of other departments also. Now let's see what is second party audit. As the word says, second, that means we have two parties involvement. That that means there'll be an organization and there'll be another organization. Now, how do you think the two organizations can be related? It can be a supplier and a customer relationship. For example, if let's say I am manufacturing Coke on behalf of a Coca-Cola, they come as a customer and do the audit. So that becomes a supplier contractor relationship. I am a hotel personnel. I want to see if I am procuring a meat, slaughtered meat product. I go and audit the person who is processing or slaughtering the meat products for me, or who's making who's supplying me with the milk products. I can identify, do a vendor evaluation, and that vendor evaluation can include a second party audit. So there are two parties. It's an external. We are not belonging to the organization we are auditing, but we have a relationship, maybe a customer, supplier, vendor, whatever way you want to define that auditor. Now there's a third type of audit. That third type of audit is called the external audit, but a third party assessment. Third party assessment means the body which is assessing you is not at all related to you in terms of business. That means I am a dairy supply chain, right? I go and do the assessment of let's say I'm a ice cream manufacturer. I go and do the assessment of from where I'm procuring the milk. I go and do the assessment from where I'm getting the cones, right? So we are related. That becomes a second party. But if I ask an independent organization like BSI, DNV, Intertech, or anybody, please go and do the assessment. This is my requirement. Go and do the assessment as per ISO or by this requirement, so that we get an independent view. That becomes your third party. Another type of audit, like your regulators audit, will also be your third party, because the party is independent from what the work which is being performed by, right? So I hope you know there are three important types of audits: first party, second party, and third party. An entire process of assessment, there is something you are trying to get more information in terms of the objective evidences. You are trying to get more evidences on the compliance. Maybe during the process of getting the evidences of compliance, you may end up getting the evidences for non-compliance. But please keep in mind that the objective of an audit is to get the compliance, right? Now, let's say the very important thing is, in order to get that compliance, what kind of activities you need to do the planning. You remember PDCA, plan, do, check, act. We talked about it in my previous lecture also in this week. But let me again tell you what is PDCA. PDCA is P stands for plan, do, check, and act. Now, it is also known as a Deming cycle. Deming cycle because it says that we need to, for any activities, any process to be done, we need to do a lot of planning. We plan the activities. We see that everything will be as per as desired. and then we do the activity. That means you actually do the auditing, and then you check, you see that whatever was required as per the audit process, we have gathered, we have handed over the report, and then you look into the corrective actions and reporting and follow up. This all will come under your PDC. And then we come as act. Act means in the future audits, your audit report will be acting as a tool, so that the auditor will now know, okay, there were more issues in production, so I can give more time to the production, and I can reduce my time with the management, or with the stores, because stores is more or less good as I can see, but I cannot skip because that's part of the requirement, but I can reduce my timeline. In case I find something, I can look into the audit trail for that, right? So this is all, all PDCA approach which needs to be applied in the audit plan. Now, what entire auditing process. Now, let's see, when we say audit plan, what does it mean? Audit plan. What all the things you need to cover in audit plan? It is the scope of the audit. Now, what do you mean by the scope of the audit? Scope of the audit will be this, primarily, most of the cases, it is the scope of the organization. For example, I am a ice cream manufacturer, so my scope will be starting from the procurement of the milk till the ice cream, distribution. It goes out of my system. So audit scope will be that. But if I'm doing an internal audit and I'm doing an audit of a particular purchase department, my audit scope is only purchase department. So I have to define, I need to understand very clearly what is my audit scope. Then comes our audit criteria. Audit scope helps you to set boundaries, brackets. आपका एक scope decide करता है that you will not go beyond this and beyond that, so that you can restrict on that particular process, you can restrict on that particular food chain or quality system. Now, what is this audit criteria? The audit criteria is basically the list of requirements which you need to cover. For example, I need to do an audit as per ISO 22000. Maybe you are trying to develop an audit plan for 9000 for a quality management system. The other, in the second party audit, I want to develop an take audit criteria as my customer's requirement, because I need to get the compliance of the customer requirement. So audit criteria means what set of requirements you need to follow. Please always keep in mind, these are external audit criteria. But if organization has defined something or some procedures, that also becomes it's an obvious audit criteria which is there. So always keep in mind. In my next slides, I've tried to list down all the audit criteria for your ease. Then we need to identify what is going to be my audit team. For example, I am going for an audit of a fishery industry. Let's say I'm not a fishery expert, but yes, I know the ISO 22000. So now my audit team means that in case I need for certain areas, I may be needing a specific expert who can tell me if the fish is having a problem, histamine will be an issue, what kind of a residues I can expect in fish, what will be the antibiotics, what will be the aquaculture pond related issues, or is there can I expect heavy metals or something like that. So for that I need an expert also. So my audit team will be comprising of audit team should be such that it is competent enough to help me do the audit activities, right? So it is very important, and all these activities are part of your planning exercise. Then you decide your dates and duration. That means when do you want to do the assessment and how long? Because looking into the size of the organization, number of processes, you may complete your audit in 1 day, or you may require 1 week. So depends on how big the organization is, how many for example, if I have to do an audit of Domino's and I need to give them the ISO certification for Delhi region, I may have to cover their outlets also, or I just have to see their central commissary. So that all depends on your audit scope, and accordingly you have to decide their or duration for which you do, right? Then you have to develop a process matrix. Process matrix means you try to see what all processes are being covered, who is going to do what audit. A kind of a timetable structure has to be created depending on what kind of a process matrix are there. Process matrix can also be, I can also say that process matrix will help you in developing your checklist, which will be the next part of the audit flow plan. So let's have a quick look on what are the various sources of requirements. That is, you can set your audit criteria based on that. The first and the foremost is your legal requirements. It's not mentioned that you decided that I am going for a certification audit of ISO 22000, but it is implied that if you are thinking to go for ISO 22000, you have still to fulfill the audit criteria of statutory and legislative requirements. Then the second important is your organization own process and operation. Whatever you have written down in your manual, in your procedures, is becomes your audit criteria. Any code of practice which you feel is applicable to you, yes, that becomes your criteria. Procedures, work instructions, specifications, system standards, these all becomes your audit criteria. Now, what system standards? Any ISO standards for which you are going to do the audit. Then you start developing your working documents, right? Now, what are your working documents? Working documents will be, you try to develop based on your process matrix, a checklist, right? You take care, you look for the standard for which you are going for an audit. You make sure that you are carrying the copy of that standard or copy of the guideline documents, code of practices. It will be easy for you, because then otherwise you'll have to ask, okay, when I say codex food hygiene practices, okay, so where is that codex standard, how I can see, or something like that will come, right? So that you have to look into. And then comes the forms and standard, means NC form and other things, and then the checklist which is being prepared. Now, notifications to the audit. Notifications to the audit means you have to send the notification for your audit to the auditee with along with a detailed audit plan, audit program, timetable, like 10 o'clock I'll have the opening meeting, 10:30 will go to this department, 10:40 will go to this department. Checklist you may or may not notify. Now let me explain you. In mostly in case of the third party audit, and when it is the first time you are doing the, or you are going for a certification audit, most of the certification bodies, they have their own detailed checklist of, it is being prepared for based on the clauses of the standard, and generally we ask the organization to fill it up so that we know how these clauses are being implemented, and then we check it, because this checklist helps auditors to do a good amount of our document review, right? So that is there. Then when we do talk about the audits, always keep in mind that audit will cannot happen without having the sets of meeting. So there'll be a lot of meetings in the during the audits, and there'll be opening meeting, closing meeting, feedback meeting, and team liaison meeting. Feedback meeting will be generally between the client and the audit team, while team liaison meetings will be within the audit team, so that if there are multiple locations team is doing the audit, they can have a team liaison meeting and they can discuss with each other. Then comes the audit execution, actual conduct. Now, what we were talking about was primarily the audit planning. Now, once you have done the planning, then you have to actually make sure that the policy team documentation, you have to look into the implementation and operation, right? When you are starting with the audit execution of, let's say, food safety, FSMS or QMS, you check the organization's plan for having a FSMS program, implementation of that particular program, verify whether yes, it is properly implemented and corrective actions are taken whenever there is a mistake, and how management is taking into account the reports of this audits and reviewing it. The next important component of the auditing, like for example, team meetings and other part, I will cover more in detail and audit execution in my second session. But let's in the first session we'll talk more into the planning. And when we say you have to decide on the audit team, the most important thing is you need to understand how you're going to decide your audit team. What will be the competence of the auditor, and what as a roles and responsibilities as an auditor, as a lead auditor, what all you have to keep in mind. So auditors should have a demonstrated, they should demonstrate certain level of skills. Now these skills are should be based on the education, experience, trainings which are being done, and then there's a qualification process which any organization, whether it's internal audit, whether it's external audit, they have to show that qualification. Qualification means you are actually demonstrate the ability to fulfill the specified requirement. For example, let's say, let me explain you with an example. If myself or maybe you want to become an auditor, you need to have a basic education on the food safety, and then like you are doing a PG diploma on food safety. You need to have an experience in certain type of industry, and you should have the training on the auditor's skill. They are generally these trainings are being done as a internal auditor course, as a lead auditor course, or as a webinars or something like that. And then the qualification process means you may go in 4 or 2 or 3 assessments as an observer to see how the audit is actually being performed. So that becomes your qualification, means basic pre activities of education and experience, followed by the qualification process of observation audits will qualify you to become an auditor. And then you try to write a report when you are going as an observer, so that your report writing skill is also improved. Because auditor just does please understand that auditor does not just means that going into a plant, seeing the GMP issues, coming out telling no, this is wrong, this is wrong, that is wrong. No, a good auditor means he has to be able to do a good planning, good timetable, good team, correct competence, and at the second part, that is the end of the audit, he's able to do a good reporting. That means he's able to prepare a good report, tell the organization where the problems are. So some of the basic and important qualifications which an auditor should have includes needs needs to judge whether the organization has arrived at a sensible interpretation of the standard. For this, you have to make sure that auditor has to do a lot of studying of the standard, interpretation of the clauses, lot of study of the organization system, basic understanding on how it goes. Because I'm manufacturing a biscuit. Let's say ITC is manufacturing, GSK is manufacturing, and Britannia is manufacturing. We cannot expect all the three to have a similar kind of a oven system or something. So we have to keep ourselves very open for whatever the system is, and it should be able to meet the desired objective of food safety, right? So objective of the system is that quality must be consistently achieved. Possible consequences of in case something goes wrong, and make sure that you always take into good account of the other people opinion. Other people opinion means you may feel that until unless you reach to a temperature of 70-degree core, it cannot be done. But just see how they are trying to achieve that 70-degree temperature. So that's very important. And then the most important skill of an auditor is use common sense. That means you have to make sure that you are not as soon as you wear an auditor's robe, you forget everything and lose your basic common understanding. Now what auditor has to look, it has to look for policies, systems, documentation, and effective system implementation. we all need to understand that there cannot be an absolute perfection, but the degree of compliance. So that means you may not see that there's always 100% compliance, but yes, a good amount of compliance, and there's no major issue that can lead to a system lapse, because there's always a scope of improvement in any system, even if we do not get any non-conformances. Some of the roles of the auditor, they need to make sure that the factual information to which the criteria is being met is properly laid down. Conclusions must be firmly based on the objective evidence. Least auditor must always be put to charge, you know. So if you have anything on doubt, put it to lead auditor. Auditor's responsibility includes complying with the requirement, follow plan, procedures, whatever is there, and then collecting the objective evidences. Always be alert. You know, sometimes we used to say the auditors should be like elephants. I always, use this thing. What does that means, elephant? Elephant does not mean that they have to be fat, plump, you know. But even if whatever happens, you need to have big ears. That means as an auditor, you have to be a very, very good listener. So that whatever comes to your way, you have to pick up from that good listening exercises the points which are important to show compliances or non-compliances. Then you should have a big nose so that you can, even if the auditee tries to hide something, you can sense what's going on. You have to be able to verify the corrective actions, make the documentation, always support your team, be ethical, you know, the ethical manner, professional judgment, persistent. All these are part of the auditor's attributes, right? So fact finding, all these things are part of auditor's attribute. These are some of the attributes of an internal and the external audits. In case there's an external audit, generally we have the lead auditor. So these are some of the important responsibilities of the lead auditor, including chairing of the opening and closing meeting, ensure that everything is being done as per plan. Because he is the one who's representing the entire third party body, and ensuring that all the tasks given to the individuals are appropriately fulfilled. Now, again, very important before the session, goes on, I wanted to touch upon this very, very important topic on the checklist. Checklist is a very important tool, at least for those who are the first time auditors, like means who are entering into the assessment field, so that they can very well understand the clauses. Now, these checklists should be always prepared, keeping in mind the audit objectives. That means you have to be very clear on what you want to achieve. Whether you are going for looking for system effectiveness, what is my audit criteria, what is my processes which I want to cover. So it is a part of the planning process, and it always keeps you on the audit pace in a particular way. They control the checklist can control you in terms of missing out anything, and also it reduces the auditor's bias, because sometimes you get carried off when an auditee says something, and then just you keep on having discussions on one small topic and you miss out on many other things. So checklist has a very good benefit, and also it reduces your workloads during the audit. Now, how to prepare this checklist? Because there are disadvantages of this checklist also. Sometimes we forget to we miss the audit trails, we miss the important issues of the assessment by just following the checklist. Make sure that you make your questions in a very open-ended form. For example, do you have a policy? If you write in your checklist, they'll respond as yes or no, and the matter closes. They have a policy. Now, as an assessor, you have to just when you make a checklist, keep in your mind that if I'm going to look the organization, a policy, what I expect in that policy. Just list down that what you want. For example, what type of a policy is being maintained? The policy address objectives, communication system of the policy, who is owning the policy, whether management is aware of the policy. So for all these things has to be kept. For example, if I am going for a management audit, that means I am going and asking the top management. I may not ask him to tell me what is your hazard in the food safety, because he is not a part of my hazard team. He's a management. So what kind of a question I should expect to ask him? I should ask him how your policy ensures that the food safety is priority, how you think you have communicated to your down the line member, how you are reviewing in case some problem comes, how you are providing the resources, because these are the management responsibilities. So you must ask. So your checklist should understand which process I'm auditing, which particular clauses of my standard will be applicable. So it cannot be just random list of clauses and then you from each process you go and keep on asking each clause. No, that won't help you. In fact, that will further confuse you. So in case you have to prepare a checklist, first understand what process I'm auditing, see how this process is interacting within the system, convert the clause of the standard in the question and topics, make sure that your questions are open ended, right? They are not closed ended. Use these questions in the system, plan what to look at, plan what to look for, consider your sample size. Like means in case I want to check the compliance of CCP, how much how much how many days of records I'm going to check. So you should be sure, like for example, I can randomly check 3 records from the current month. I can go and ask them to bring this next month 10 records of dates, 10 to 15th of March. I can ask them to give me some more records of, let's say, there is a COVID situation, how you are handling an emergency situation, how you are handling a food safety team member. And then when I go down to talk to a food handler, I'll say, okay, there was a situation of, coronavirus in March. So how did they give them the leave or something? We will just try to get information down the line to the level they are. Not you'll ask what kind of an emergency preparedness plan was there, because that's they may not aware. They only know we have been given a facility for hand washing, sanitizer दे दिया, mask दे दिया, जिसको बीमारी थी उसको रिपोर्ट करके चेक करके ही हमें अंदर आने देते थे. So these are the things which they are going to do the assessment. So thank you all. I think I was a little fast, but